Hello, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International. On tonight's headlines. Tennis world number one Novak Djokovic fought against deportation from Australia after the government revoked his visa for failing to meet COVID vaccine entry requirements. The DOH reported 29 new cases of the Omicron variant detected from the 48 samples sequenced last January 2. Japan and Australia on Thursday signed a landmark treaty to strengthen defense ties, saying the accord would contribute to regional stability as China expands its military and economic clout.
You see behind me.
Integrating a real company and its employees in the virtual city, feeling the impact of a gunshot while playing a video game, the race to make more real the parallel and still blurred universe of the metaverse has been launched for the CES exhibitors, which opened Wednesday in Las Vegas. People in Melbourne believe the tennis world number one Novak Djokovic will not be welcome to play by the majority of people in the Australian Open. First, let's listen in.
Issue of Mr. Djokovic. Rules are rules. And there are no special cases. Rules are rules. It's what I said to you yesterday. That's the policy of the government and has been our government's strong border protection policies, and particularly in relation to the pandemic, that has ensured that Australia has one of the lowest death rates from COVID anywhere in the world. The ABF has done their job. Entry with a visa requires double vaccination or a medical exemption. I'm advised that such an exemption was not in place, and as a result, he is subject to the same rule as anyone else. I also want to stress that ultimately, this is the responsibility of the traveller.
Break, and we'll be right back.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Bagong taon, bagong pag-asa para sa mga kabataang gustong makapag-aral. Tutugunan ng Responde. Delikadong tulay sa Naik, Cavite. Inaksyonan. At isang dog lover turned rescuer. Ating kilalanin. Sabado, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi. Ito ang Responde, mata ng mamamayan.
Sa kabila ng pandemya, patuloy na lumalago ang mga startup ventures sa bansa. Many entrepreneurs want a stake in the e-commerce boom, desiring to attain global success. Ngunit paano makakapasok ang mga MSME sa world market? Anong mga plano ang dapat natin gawin bago pumasok sa global stage? In this episode, we'll answer those questions as we discuss how Philippine startups can tap into the world market with our guest, award-winning host and co-founder of EnterPH, RJ Ledesma.
It's a new economy, new world. So even if you're there, diba, startups leverage technology, leverage the ability that you don't have to also physically meet all the time. And it changes things, diba? There's innovations that didn't exist before, that exist now because of technology and because startups enable that.
All these, this episode, Open for Business.
Sarado nga pala ang puso mo sa tulad ko. Di mo ito sarado nga pala ang isip mo sa tulad ko. Di naman gwapo. Sarado.
Hi, ako nga pala po si Nico Valid at may tunto pa rin na Letters to Send Request ngayong Sabado sa Letters and Music 1 to 2 p.m. At dito lamang yan sa Net 25. See ya!
Welcome back. Tennis world number 1 Novak Djokovic fought against deportation from Australia on Thursday after the government revoked his visa for failing to meet COVID vaccine entry requirements. Conservative Prime Minister Scott Morrison said Djokovic had failed to provide officials with evidence of double vaccination or an adequate medical exemption. Let's take a look.
Issue of Mr. Djokovic. Rules are rules. And there are no special cases. Rules are rules. It's what I said to you yesterday. That's the policy of the government and has been our government's strong border protection policies, and particularly in relation to the pandemic, that has ensured that Australia has one of the lowest death rates from COVID anywhere in the world. The ABF has done their job. Entry with a visa requires double vaccination or a medical exemption. I'm advised that such an exemption was not in place, and as a result, he is subject to the same rule as anyone else. I also want to stress that ultimately, this is the responsibility of the traveller.
The vaccine septic Serb was stopped by border officials on arrival to Australia late on Wednesday and denied entry into the country. He's currently being held at an immigration detention facility in Melbourne and faces deportation. Djokovic said he had received a medical exemption to play in the Australian Open before departing for Melbourne, sparking fury among Australians who have endured harsh restrictions since the heavily mutated Omicron variant entered the country. Now, people in Melbourne believe that tennis world number 1 Novak Djokovic will not be welcome to play by the majority of people in the Australian Open. Again, let's listen in.
People in the state have done it pretty hard over the last couple of years, and I think there is an anti-vaccine sentiment here. So anyone who comes out against vaccines and health protections is not going to be really well received in Australia. At this stage, no, not until he's been open about it. I don't think he should come and play. I don't think anyone should be treated any differently to anyone else. We really believe in equity and equality here, and the same rules apply to everyone. So if Novak wants to come out and say why he should be let in, why he should play, then happy for him to play. If that's one of the reasons why, if that's one of the laws that applies to us all, one of the reasons that applies to us all.
he's a pretty good player, and I suppose people enjoy watching good players, but I don't know that the majority of people would be all that happy with somebody who is potentially putting others at risk playing.
Meanwhile, election rallies were cancelled in India's heartland Thursday as authorities fret over a sudden COVID surge driven by the Omicron variant, which has seen confirmed infections nearly triple in 2 days. Take a look. Now, teeming crowds have thronged campaign events for the next month's poll in Uttar Pradesh, the country's most populous state with over 200 million people and a pillar of support for the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party. But with several cities imposing coronavirus curfews and health experts warning of exponential infection growth, several parties have brought their public campaigns to a halt. India recorded more than 90,000 new infections overnight, while financial capital Mumbai saw its highest daily count yet in the pandemic. Delhi has ordered all residents outside of essential workers to stay home this weekend. Amid inbound flight restrictions imposed by the Hong Kong government, the Philippine Airlines has canceled 10 flights from Manila bound for the Chinese semi-autonomous region from January 6 to the 21st. In an advisory on Thursday, PAL said flight PR300 supposedly scheduled on January 6, 7, 9, 12, 13, 14, 16, 19, 20, and 21 were canceled, but flight PR301 Hong Kong to Manila will continue to operate as scheduled every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. PAL spokesperson Shelo Villaluna told reporters that the planes will fly into Hong Kong as all cargo flights. And then the return flight to Manila, the PR301, shall carry the passengers. Affected passengers may refund their ticket, excluding the ticketing service charge, or convert the ticket into a voucher valid for 1 year from the date of issuance. The travel credits will be equivalent to the unused base fare. Now, this move is part of its COVID-19 restrictions after Hong Kong detected cases of the Omicron variant. Hong Kong has imposed a ban on flights from 8 countries, including the Philippines, from January 8 to the 21st. Meanwhile, Macau has announced a 2-week ban on any inbound passenger flights from outside of China after 3 coronavirus cases were found in passengers arriving from overseas. Take a look. Now, the move came the same day Hong Kong banned flights from 8 nations and ramped up social distancing measures, leaving the 2 neighboring Chinese territories even more cut off from the rest of the world. Like mainland China, Hong Kong and Macau have maintained some of the world's harshest measures throughout the pandemic, including virtually closed borders, weeks-long quarantines, targeted lockdowns, and mass testing. Macau's Health Bureau announced Wednesday it will prohibit civil aircraft from carrying passengers from places outside China to Macau for 2 weeks starting midnight on Sunday. Macau bars non-residents from entering the city, while residents returning from outside of China have to quarantine for at least 21 days, similar to Hong Kong. Health officials on Wednesday identified 3 imported asymptomatic cases in Macau related to travelers from the United Kingdom and the Philippines. The former Portuguese colony turned Chinese casino hub has only recorded 79 confirmed cases using the mainland's tallying method that excludes asymptomatic patients and no deaths. Meanwhile, here in the country, the Department of Health, or DOH, today reported another 17,220 fresh coronavirus infections. In its latest COVID-19 bulletin, the agency said this raised the active case count to 56,551. Thursday's new infections are equivalent to a nearly 60% increase from Wednesday's 10,775 fresh cases. Meanwhile, 660 new recoveries brought the number of recovered cases to 2,780,613, or 96.3% of a total of 2,888,917 infections since the pandemic started back in March 2020. The death toll has reached 51,743 deaths, with 81 new deaths, representing 1.79% of overall cases. Staying in the country, the Department of Health also reported 29 new cases of the Omicron variant detected from the 48 samples sequenced last January 2. In a joint statement with the University of the Philippines, Philippine Genome Center, and the University of the Philippines National Institutes of Health, the DOH also reported 18 cases positive for Delta variant, while one had no lineage assigned. The agencies noted that the latest sequencing run was composed of samples from 19 returning overseas Filipinos and 29 local cases from areas with case clusters. The DOH said, quote, the 29 Omicron variant cases are composed of 10 ROFs and 19 local cases with indicated addresses in the NCR, bringing the total number of confirmed Omicron variant cases to 43. Of the 19 local cases, 14 are still active, while 3 have been tagged as recovered, and there are 2 cases whose outcomes are still being verified. The DOH said it's verifying the test results and health status of all passengers of these flights to determine if there are other confirmed cases or passengers who became symptomatic after arrival. The DOH encouraged eligible individuals, especially senior citizens, individuals with comorbidities, and children to get vaccinated and boosted immediately. It also reminded the public to isolate immediately and do the right test at the right time at the earliest signs of symptoms. We go now to the UK, where the government announced changes to COVID travel rules for England. Let's find out what they are from Ashley Espiritu, who's joining us live from London. Ashley.
Hello, Alma. Thank you. The UK government announced changes Wednesday to COVID travel rules for England, scrapping the need for visitors to have pre-departure tests and quarantine on arrival until they have tested negative. The new arrangements under which arrivals will be able to take a lateral flow in the first 2 days of travel rather than a more expensive PCR test come as official data showed 1 in 15 people in England were infected with coronavirus in the last week of 2021. The UK, already among the worst hit countries in Europe by the pandemic with a virus death toll of nearly 150,000, has seen a fresh surge in cases due to the arrival of the Omicron variant in late November. Updating lawmakers after daily case numbers crossed the 200,000 threshold in recent days, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said travel curbs beefed up last month to contain the strain were now ineffective. Johnson told MPs, now Omicron is so prevalent. These measures are having limited impact on the growth in cases, while continuing to pose significant costs on our travel industry. So I can announce that in England from 4 a.m. on Friday, we will be scrapping the pre-departure test, which discourages many from traveling. Johnson noted only those testing positive on lateral flow devices would be required to then do a further PCR test to help us identify any new variants at the border. However, he also announced testing rules for the general population in England without symptoms would be eased to help mitigate the fallout from the record infection levels. Asymptomatic people who test positive will no longer require a PCR test from January 11. Instead, those who receive a positive result on a lateral flow device will be required to self-isolate immediately without getting the PCR confirmation. A similar system will be rolled out in Scotland and Wales from Thursday. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Can you quickly run through the present restrictions or curbs there in the United Kingdom?
Yes, Alma. Well, in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, where devolved governments have reimposed some restrictions in recent weeks, rates were slightly lower at between 1 in 20 and 1 in 25. Despite the unprecedented numbers, Johnson has opted not to introduce tougher restrictions in England, arguing the rising levels of hospitalizations and serious illness do not yet require more measures. He has instead turned to so-called Plan B measures, mandating masks, wearing in wearing in most settings and advising people to work from home if possible, while ramping up the vaccine booster program. It has seen nearly 60% of over 12 so far get a third dose, but other UK regions have tightened rules, with devolved governments in Edinburgh, Cardiff, and Belfast all rolling out post-New Year curbs on socialising and large events. Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon said on Wednesday the measures there, which have included closing nightclubs and limiting sizes of gatherings, would remain in place until at least mid-January. Back to you, Elma.
All right. Thank you very much for that update. Ashley, you stay safe.
Thank you for having me today, Alma. I'm Ashley Spiritu reporting to you from the EBC London Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
Meanwhile, Japan's Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi urged his U.S. counterpart to consider restricting American troop movement in the country after a surge in COVID cases on bases and surrounding communities. The request to U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken comes as virus cases surge in Okinawa, which hosts most of the U.S. forces in Japan and is now seeing a rise in community infections. The region's governor has blamed the rise in local cases on the clusters first seen among U.S. troops. U.S. forces, Japan said in a statement Thursday, has heightened anti-infection measures at its bases nationwide, including mask mandates on off-base and requiring a negative test for trips outside. Okinawan officials say the U.S. military reported 998 infections between December 15 and January 5 on bases, a figure that includes military personnel and their families, as well as contractors, but not local residents working for the U.S. military. Infections among U.S. force members are not included in Okinawa's daily case reports, although cases among local Japanese staff on the bases are. Okinawa Governor Denny Tamaki has previously criticized the U.S. military for failing to adhere to Japan's strict measures for overseas arrivals. And last month, Hayashi expressed strong regret to the commander of U.S. forces in Japan over the growing number of virus cases. In other news, France's lower house of parliament on Thursday passed in a first reading a bill further tightening COVID measures after 3 days of tense debates fueled by President Emmanuel Macron's warning that he wanted to, quote, piss off the unvaccinated. Now, the bill would require a full course of vaccination against COVID-19 to enjoy basic parts of life, including intercity train travel, attending cultural events, or eating out. A recent test of proof of recovery would no longer be valid. The legislation was expected to pass relatively smoothly through Parliament with support from the right-wing opposition, but it was initially blocked this week when deputies managed to defeat the government on a procedural vote. Discussions were suspended again in the early hours of Wednesday after a furor caused by Macron's comments that he would, quote, piss off until the end the unvaccinated. Now, this will now go to Senate, the upper house dominated by the right-wing opposition that is expected to make amendments. Now, that could put into question the government's target date of January 15 for implementing the new vaccine pass. Prime Minister Jean Castex told BFM television he hoped very much that the January 15 date could still be kept. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Welcome back. North Korea has tested successfully a hypersonic missile, state media reported Thursday, in the first major weapons test by the nuclear-armed nation this year. Now, this was the second reported test of what Pyongyang claimed were hypersonic gliding missiles as it pursues the sophisticated technology despite international sanctions and condemnation. Hypersonic missiles move far faster and are more agile than standard ones, making them much harder for missile defense systems on which the U.S. is spending billions to intercept. The missile fired on Wednesday carried a hypersonic gliding warhead that precisely hit a target 700 kilometers away, according to the official Korean Central News Agency, saying this without identifying the launcher. The warhead also demonstrated a new capability, moving 120 kilometers laterally after it detached from the launcher to strike the target. Hypersonic missiles were listed among the top priority tasks for strategic weapons in North Korea's current 5-year plan, and it announced its first test of the Hwasong-8 in September last year. A Moscow-led military alliance dispatched troops to help quell mounting unrest in Kazakhstan on Thursday, as police said dozens were killed trying to storm government buildings. Long seen as one of the most stable of the ex-Soviet republics of Central Asia, energy-rich Kazakhstan is now facing its biggest crisis in decades after days of protests over rising fuel prices escalated into widespread unrest. Under increasing pressure, President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev appealed overnight to the Russia-dominated Collective Security Treaty Organization, which includes 5 other Soviet states, to combat what he called terrorist groups that had received extensive training abroad. Within hours, the alliance said the first troops had been sent, including Russian paratroopers and military units from the other CSTO members. Officials said more than 1,000 people had been wounded so far in the unrest, with nearly 400 hospitalized and 62 in intensive care. Protests spread across the nation of 19 million this week in outrage over a New Year increase in prices for liquefied petroleum gas, which is widely used to fuel cars in the west of the country. Thousands took to the streets in Almaty and in the western province of Mangseitao, saying the price rise was unfair given oil and gas exporter Kazakhstan's vast energy reserves. Protesters were reported to have stormed several government buildings, including the Almaty mayor's office and the presidential residence. Meanwhile, the EU and the UN called for restraint on all sides, while Washington urged authorities to allow the protesters to express themselves peacefully. Take a look.
Following with concern and are monitoring the situation in Kazakhstan. I think it's very important for all involved in these current events to exercise restraint, refrain from violence, and promote dialogue in addressing all of the pertinent issues.
As you noted, we have seen that, and we're monitoring reports of protests in Kazakhstan. We support calls for calm, for protesters to express themselves peacefully, and for authorities to exercise restraint. There are some crazy Russian claims about the U.S. being behind this, so let me just use this opportunity to convey that as absolutely false and clearly a part of the standard Russian disinformation playbook we've seen a lot of in past years. Go ahead.
The country has been roiled by protests since the start of the year, which escalated Wednesday into clashes with police. Authorities cut internet and mobile phone access nationwide and earlier declared states of emergency in the epicenters of the rallies, financial capital Almaty and Mangistau province, as well as in the capital Nur Sultan, where no demonstrations have so far been reported. The state of emergency later extended across the entire ex-Soviet country. Meanwhile, Japan and Australia on Thursday signed a landmark treaty to strengthen defense ties, saying the accord would contribute to regional stability as China expands its military and economic clout. Take a look.
Prime Minister, today we demonstrate the strength of our bonds as we sign our reciprocal access agreement, the first of its kind for Japan. The RAA is a landmark treaty which opens a new chapter for advanced defence and security cooperation in what is a complex and rapidly changing world, something you and I both understand very well.
まず本日、署名させていただきました日豪円滑化協定は日豪の安保協力を新たな段階に引き上げる画期的な協定であると思っています。現下の安全保障環境において日豪のこの安保協力の重要性、これはますます高まっています。両国が精力的に交渉してきた成果が今ここに結実したこと、大変嬉しく思っています。
Japan and Australia, along with the U.S. and India, are part of the Quad grouping that has worked to build an alliance in the face of China's swelling presence across Asia, including its threats to vital international sea lanes. Also in September, the U.S., Britain, and Australia announced they had formed this new alliance called AUKUS, under which Australia will acquire nuclear-powered submarines using U.S. technology. Meanwhile, Taiwanese troops and armored vehicles were deployed Thursday for a mock urban street battle in the latest drill preparing forces against China, which has long vowed to take the island. Democratic Taiwan lives under constant threat of an invasion by authoritarian China, which claims the self-ruled island as part of its territory to be seized one day by force if necessary. On Thursday, soldiers from two platoons faced off in a simulated battle, firing at each other from houses and sandbags barricades as tanks rolled down a street in a mock-up town, complete with signs for pharmacies and brands. Urban warfare has become an increasingly key training subject for the military. For decades, analysts largely concurred that China simply could not pull it off, but Beijing has dramatically closed the gap in recent years. Chinese warplanes are making historically high levels of incursions into Taiwan's air defense zone, and fears among Western allies are growing that Beijing could order an invasion, even if they consider it unlikely for now. Taiwan recorded incursions by around 970 Chinese military aircraft last year, according to a database compiled by AFP, more than double some 380 carried out in 2020. China has also publicized multiple military drills simulating an invasion of the island. Meanwhile, the U.S. Justice Department intends to pursue perpetrators of the January 6, 2021 assault on the Capitol, whatever their status, according to Attorney General Merrick Garland, who is under pressure to charge former President Donald Trump. Let's take a look.
The actions we have taken thus far will not be our last. The Justice Department remains committed to holding all January 6 perpetrators at any level accountable under law, whether they were present that day or were otherwise criminally responsible for the assault on our democracy. We will follow the facts wherever they lead.
We'll never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. Freedom!
A year later, more than 700 people involved in the January 6th attack have been charged for assaulting law enforcement officers and breaking into and desecrating the halls of Congress. Now, if they find evidence suggesting that Trump knowingly incited the attack or plotted to illegally keep power, should they risk more turmoil by seeking an unprecedented criminal prosecution of an ex-president? Trump, who remains the most powerful figure in the Republican Party, plans his own January 6 commemoration in Palm Beach, Florida, which he says will focus on the rigged presidential election of 2020. Although he has shown no evidence that the election was fraudulent, polls show that around 2/3 of Republican voters believe in him. And Republican lawmakers are aware that Trump can make or break them politically. They have almost uniformly fallen in line. Even former Vice President Mike Pence won't speak against him. Instead, the party is seeking to regain power in the 2022 congressional election. Staying in the U.S., 8 children lost their lives in a Wednesday morning blaze, the city's deadliest single fire in more than a century. The fire tore through public housing apartments in the eastern U.S. city of Philadelphia. Take a look.
This is, without a doubt, one of the most tragic days in our city's history. Loss of so many people in such a tragic way. I don't have much more to say than please keep all these folks, and especially these children, in your prayers. Losing so many kids is just devastating.
The fire was extinguished, and it was terrible. I've been around for 35 years now, and this is probably one of the worst fires I've ever been to.
Just shocked. I am in shock, but I don't feel like it. I have been for the last however many hours I've been out here. What time is it? Everybody is gone except for one child, and he's still here. He's 5 years old, and he's still trying to get he don't know what's going on. He want his mom, he want his dad, he want his sisters, he want his cousins, he want everybody.
Officers found heavy fire coming from the second floor of the 3-story row house when they arrived at 6:40 a.m. and all took almost 1 hour to get it under control, according to the fire department. The 3-story, about 26 people had been living in the building, 8 on the first floor and 18 across the second and third floors. According to Murphy, the 3-story home had been converted into 2 apartments, according to police quoted in the Philadelphia Inquirer. And in sports, star Brooklyn guard Kyrie Irving scored 22 points in an NBA season debut delayed by his unvaccinated status, helping the Nets rally for a 129-121 victory over the Pacers in Indiana. Take a look.
There's a lot of gratitude just to be present tonight with everyone, and just go out there and have fun doing what we love to do. You're right. I've had a lot of debuts, but nothing comes close to this one. It just it meant a little bit more, just because at this stage, taking off 8 months or being out of the game for 8 months and coming back in, there's so much uncertainty. Just how many minutes, what's the flow of the game going to be like? How are my teammates going to feel? And what's the game flow going to be? You just don't have any idea. So I went in with just an open mindset, just to ground myself, be present, and do whatever it takes to win. I think in the first possession when I shot that shot, I was so caught up in just making my first 2 points. I was so nervous, and naturally, as a performer, I still get nervous. But that first shot was like, man, I wanted that to go in, and then I settled down closer to the second half. Once I came back out, and I just said, whatever's needed out there, listen, I'm just going to do, and I know everyone's going to follow suit like they've been doing all season.
Not a big surprise watching him play practice. He's so gifted and talented, and you could see the rhythm was there, but it's still an adaptation. So we got to give him some space here as he transitions back to playing. But tonight he was big.
I feel like he's been playing all season. He looks comfortable as usual. His pace, his rhythm, looked like Kyrie. He definitely needed. It felt good to have him on the court. Our spirit, our energy is better. Just felt really good.
Irving's first appearance was just one highlight on a night that featured the Dallas Mavericks' 99-82 triumph over the league-leading Golden State Warriors. The victory in Dallas set the scene perfectly for a post-game ceremony to retire the jersey number 41 of Mavericks franchise icon Dirk Nowitzki. In Indianapolis, all eyes were on Irving, who missed the first 35 games of the season. He played just under 32 minutes, scoring 10 of his 22 points in the fourth quarter to help Brooklyn erase a 19-point third quarter deficit. In other news, members of the Edo Firemen Preservation Association performed the Japanese traditional firefighting techniques during the New Year's Fire Brigades exercise. Take a look.
明けましておめでとうございます。江戸町火消し誕生以来300年余りの歴史と伝統を受け継ぐ東京消防出初め式が金子総務大臣をお迎えし、このように挙行できますことを大変嬉しく思います。18,600人の消防職員、22,000人の消防団員の皆様は都民の命、財産を守るため昼夜を分かたず力を尽くされています。またこのコロナ禍において現場の最前線に立つ救急隊員の皆様はウイルスの脅威に立ち向かい日々懸命に活動しておられます。改めて敬意を表します。
They demonstrated the acrobatic performance, which has a history of more than 300 years, while the present-day firefighters exercise the firefighting and rescue drills. According to Japan Times, some of the firefighting technicians or techniques date back to the Endo era, which is 1603 to 1867, and men dressed as Edo-era firemen will perform or are performing the acrobatic stunts on top of bamboo ladders, as we saw earlier. Now, due to anti-coronavirus measures, a limited number of seats for the public were chosen from online applications in November. Anyone showing up on the day without a reservation were not allowed in. The organization behind the Grammys on Wednesday postponed the Music Awards Gala scheduled for January 31st due to uncertainty surrounding the Omicron variant of COVID-19 that has ripped through the U.S. in recent weeks. Minutes later, the prestigious Sundance Film Festival, which was set to begin January 20 in Park City, Utah, announced it was shifting all of its premieres and events online, a move it deemed necessary despite the most ambitious protocols. In a statement, the Recording Academy said that holding the show on January 31st simply contains too many risks, and it would announce a rescheduled date soon. The heavily mutated Omicron variant, the most transmissible to date, accounted for around 95% of U.S. cases in the week ending January 1st. Integrating a real company and its employees in a virtual city, feeling the impact of gunshot while playing a video game, the race to make more real the parallel and still blurred universe of the metaverse has been launched for the Consumer Electronics Show exhibitors, which opened Wednesday in Las Vegas. Take a look.
You see behind me is M-City. M-City is the metaverse's first city for enterprise. What does that mean? It means that companies can now securely start their migration into the metaverse. In the city, you can do anything that you do in a physical city. Imagine any activity that happened in a physical structure, whether it's a retail store, a learning experience, a job interview, a board meeting, a CEO giving a town hall. All of that can now happen in an amazing structure that you construct inside of your campus in M-City.
Right now, all the haptic technology is based on vibration. But in vibration, you always only feel one sensation. But with our technology, you don't have limits. You can feel all type sensation. What is the metaverse? You cannot feel. It's only an avatar.
Future, some of the special suits like Ready Player One, they're wearing the suits. It contains every systems, cooling and heating systems, and also the body tracking system, some building the system, everything inside in the future. But currently, metaverse customer need to wear the different type of the product. It's like how to say?
Why is that?
Cyborg, that's a quite big impact for us. Because of Facebook, they have a huge amount of the money to improving the metaverse systems.
Watching a YouTube video, it's at 0.1 minute. You want to go to 30 minutes? You want to raise your YouTube volume? Lower the YouTube volume. Close YouTube. Open YouTube. The phone rings, your Apple Watch. Bring, 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 bring. Turn, activate mudra, accept call. Reject call. So the idea would be you are the input device. No longer do you need a mouse. You don't have to be right there by the computer. You can be relaxed. And most people who watch YouTube would probably say to you, I don't want to sit there every time, click, 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 click. They just want to think what they want.
Right, counterfeit goods are going to exist in the metaverse as well. Counterfeit identities are going to exist in the metaverse as well. And we've seen in many other evolutions of the internet that many times what takes place early on are the portions of the internet that we're uncomfortable with. You know, how you moderate people getting together and discussing items in a social media platform. It's not static content like words that we post today or videos that can easily call back. So how are you going to moderate and ensure that it's a safe place for our children to participate in the future?
Is goes in and you can feel the movement.
And finally, in our news, a lifelike child-sized doll writhed and cried before slightly shocked onlookers snapping smartphone pictures at the CES Tech Show, where the line between cool and slightly disturbing robots can be thin. Again, let's take a look.
Hello there. It's wonderful to see you. Hello.
We've all seen the films, humanoid robots mingling among humans. That will happen. I'm almost certain that that will happen. But we're talking at least a decade, probably two, before a humanoid robot that can walk safely and live amongst other humans.
Hello, Morgan.
How are you?
Well, if I could feel, I would love it.
Yeah. Amica does not have an ethnicity or a race. Amica doesn't have a gender. Amica doesn't have a religion or a political view. Amica is a robot.
Thank you very much. I heard that being beautiful is a compliment to humans.
But you get that uncanny valley just before, where it doesn't quite move like a human, doesn't quite express itself or emote or talk like a human. And that's the uncanny valley, that's the scary bit. If you go further back to something that looks less like a human, then suddenly you like it a lot more.
子供っていうのは自分で具合が悪くなっても言えません。でそれを再現することでドクターはその状態を観察をして適切な処置をする必要があります。で今までのシミュレーターだったら具合が悪くなった状態から始まるんですけど、これは状態のいい状態から急に具合が悪くなるというのを表現して、トレーニングすることができます。
Thank you very much. I heard that being beautiful is a compliment to humans.
And with that, as I always say, I'll end the day on a thoughtful note. Challenges may often come our way, but sometimes it takes a good fall to know where we really stand. And this has been Eagle News International. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay alert and stay informed because we live in interesting times. Good night.